Welcome to the Armani Talks YouTube channel. I'm your host, Armani Talks. In this channel, I'm covering communication skills in order to help you level up your way with words. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome aboard. 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I'm dropping new videos on impromptu speaking, social skills, creative writing, along with other topics to make you much more articulate in expressing your ideas. If you want to stay updated, be sure to hit that subscribe button right on below, hit that bell notification, and never miss another video again. If you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you for consistently supporting me, and be sure to help me out by dropping that like right on below, because this episode is going to be worth it. We're going to be talking about how to think like a winner. And the reason that thinking ties in beautifully with communication skills is because this is the best kept secret, which is not a secret. In terms of speaking, in terms of writing, all this follows the TOLD formula. And TOLD pretty much stands for thinking out loud. That's the acronym. And you'll often hear public speakers and different writers talking about the TOLD formula. But notice what the T stands for, the first letter of the acronym. Thinking. Now, it's not rocket science when I logically break it down that thinking influences your communication skills. Because if you're very clear-headed, then it becomes much more easier to think critically. Rather than first trying to think critically, how about you become more clear-headed? Rather than having 50 different thoughts running in your mind at once when you're trying to speak, how about you center your mind around one thought? Can you do that? Because it's going to be difficult. Your mind is not naturally programmed towards that. It's something that needs to be trained into existence. But the unfortunate truth is that a lot of people are not going to put in that work. That's why a lot of people don't think like winners. They think like losers, consistently getting brainwashed by the latest narrative, constantly getting algorithms to tell them what to think about, tell them what to speak about. And it's just this rat race for the mind that they're consistently entertaining. In order to break out of this rat race, you gotta think like a winner. You gotta think like a tree. Did you say think like a tree? I did. And today's episode is going to talk about a massive event that happened 2 years ago, which allowed me to see the importance of thinking. And I'm going to tie this type of thinking into a tree. So if you're ready and excited for today's video, go on and drop that like for me right on below. 2 years ago, I was chilling with one of my friends who I've known for at least 20 years plus. And throughout my entire life knowing this guy, I always thought that he was just 1 year older than me. But on this particular day, he makes me aware that he's actually 2 years older than me. And that's when he starts breaking it down that when he first came to the US, he had a birthday back in Bangladesh, and he has a different birthday in the United States. And this is something that's very common. You'll notice a lot of people who are moving from overseas, they actually have 2 birthdays. But this was a major paradigm shift for me because my entire life, I thought he was only 1 year older than me. Imagine you have a sister who suddenly is 2 years older than you rather than 1 year, and you're like, nah, man, yeah, right. No, you're joking. That's how I was acting. And that's when I'm like, no, you definitely can't be 2 years older than me because the last time I wished you happy birthday, Wait a minute. I've actually never wished you happy birthday before. Imagine, I've known this guy for 20 plus years and not once in the interaction did I ever wish him happy birthday. And the more that I was talking, I knew that he's not too active on Facebook, but I think he found a way to even not show his birthday on Facebook. Don't quote me on that, but he keeps it hidden. But this was the first time in 20 years that I was made aware that I didn't ever wish him happy birthday. And this was the particular moment when I saw the importance of thinking, because here's what happened. I'm like, wow, there was this massive blind spot that occurred in this guy's life in relationship to me, but it didn't really happen with my life. And what I mean by that is that me not knowing his birthday was something that was predominantly centered around him. But I was thinking, how much stuff in my personal life am I completely unaware of? How many stuff in my life where I personally don't know that I have 2 birthdays? And that's when I started to understand the importance of thinking. It was a realization that happened on a practical level. Every now and then people will tell you that, yeah, you got to think because thinking is important. And it's one thing to hear it, and it's another thing to realize it for yourself. And then I started to have another insight. And the insight was that thinking is very difficult. I would actually say that writing a book, for example, and I'm not just talking about a quick little ebook. I'm talking about one of those books that people spend a lot of time on. There's a plot, there's a storyline. I think that's one of the hardest jobs out there because it requires you to think for an extended period of time. And thinking is difficult. I want to reiterate that. So if you're currently someone who is struggling with thinking certain thoughts, it was never meant to be easy. Yet, the advice is often given as though it is easy. Yo, man, just think some positive thoughts. Yo, man, instead of thinking this thought, think this instead. And it's very difficult because this person cannot even control their mind. They don't engage in stuff like meditation. So the advice of just think like this is very surface level. That's when I started to see that communication skills is the bridge towards controlling your thinking. Rather than trying to just think positive thoughts or trying to think a certain way, write or speak it into existence. And the reason that we want to write or speak it into existence is sort of like driving. Personally, I don't know much about cars. I don't know what's exactly happening under the hood, and I'm very obvious in admitting that. But all I personally know is that I know that the steering wheel works, I know the accelerator and the brakes work. And in relationship towards thinking and communicating, you trying to control what's under the hood, all the little pipes and gizmos and gadgets, is sort of like you jumping straight into thinking. But if you warm up with speaking and writing, now it's sort of like you getting into the car and you're just using the steering wheel, the accelerator, and the brakes. And another good example could be just you using the computer. You don't know much about all the hardware, the processing, all that stuff. That's not needed for you to know. But if someone's coming up to you and saying that you need to know it, it's going to overwhelm you. Instead, what you need to know is how to use the mouse, how to use the keyboard, and how to operate the screen, and that's about it. So in order to control thinking, which is the very advanced stuff, we want to warm up and we want to focus on speaking or writing. Now, personally for me, I think either path is good, but today we're going to be focusing on writing, and I want to introduce to you my Opulence journal, which is a daily gratitude list journal to become mentally rich. And I want to give you the writing formula that you can directly apply here. And you don't necessarily need a journal like this. Everything is just combined in one, so it's a system. You could just use a paper and pencil for what I'm about to describe. You want to write, but you don't want to just write out good things that's happening to you where you're just doing positive thinking. Instead, you want to think like a tree. Let's say a tree could speak, and you go up to the tree and you're like, "Who are you?" And this tree is like, "Well, I'm the trunk, I'm the branches, I'm the leaves, and I'm the roots." You're gonna be like, "But I only see the trunk, the branches, and the leaves. What is this roots that you're speaking about?" From your angle, you probably don't perceive the roots, but from the tree's angle, that's what's holding it up in the first place. What this symbolizes is that the trunk, the branches, and the leaves represent the wins in our lives, something that we typically are viewing as positive, and the roots represent the losses, the setbacks, the failures, which allow us to be held up. the common mistake is just going straight for the tree. Basically everything that's above the ground and completely ignoring the roots. That is not how a winner thinks. The winner acts like the actual tree who acknowledges its whole being. So as you're using the daily gratitude list journal, which basically has just 10 things a day that you list out, that you write out, you're focusing every single day on the top of the tree along with the bottom of the tree, and you're writing it out. So for the top of the tree, it's stuff that first comes to your mind. It's like, yes, these are stuff that I'm grateful for. And I'll give you an example real quick. Recently, I had this podcast with Life Math Money, and this was our most recent episode. And there was a follower on Twitter who just randomly sent me a thumbnail of what the podcast should be. And I thought that was really nice of him because personally, I suck at anything visual, like graphics. I don't like doing that. But this guy just slid in my DMs and gave it to me for free. So on my particular day, I was able to list that as one of the things that I was grateful for because I didn't have to spend any money and this guy did all the creative heavy lifting for me. Now let's say I want to talk about something roots related. Well, this is something where we don't really need to discriminate. We could actually bend time in order to bring this into existence. So let me just keep on going with this podcast example. Somewhere during this podcast I had with Life Math Money, we brought up the whole issue of bullying. And he broke it down beautifully in a logical concept as to why bullying typically happens from ages 12 to 14. And throughout the talk, I was thinking about it, and around that age, I recall a bunch of kids making fun of how I sounded, and I was very skinny at the time. So they were making fun of how skinny I was. And back then, I was like, man, this isn't good at all. But nowadays, that moment particularly was what allowed me to, start going to the gym, start getting stronger, start going to Toastmasters, start learning public speaking, start working my way from a guest to the recruitment chair to the external vice president of my respective Toastmasters club. So that moment, even though it seems like a very bad moment, it was the roots to my tree. It was a setback which was holding me up. And on a regular basis, I'm not really noticing something like that. But when I'm writing it out, I'm noticing that. So this is what we want in order to think very clearly, to think like a winner. We want to think like a tree that acknowledges its trunk, its branches, its leaves, the winds, plus it puts equal importance on the roots, everything that is behind the scenes, all the setbacks, losses, which eventually hold you up. I do believe that writing is one of the best skill sets out there because once you write, you're engaging so many micro muscles that it lights up the brain. You're engaging motor receptors, you're engaging memory banks, you're engaging language receptors, along with other features, all happening with the push of a pen or a pencil. So the recap for today's episode is that thinking directly influences your communication skills, but the only problem is that it's very difficult to think. You could jump into thinking if you have some sort of mental workout, such as meditation, but if you're like most people out there, it's smarter to start off with writing or speaking and eventually warm yourself up. And for today's episode, we talked about writing and we used the example from the Opulence Gratitude List journal. And we talked about thinking like a tree, the ability to focus on what's above the ground, which is our winds, and to focus on what's below the ground, the roots, the losses that we've faced that's holding us up to this day. And once we start thinking like a tree, we start to embrace the full picture of life rather than just hoping for positive moments. Instead, we can now thrive in positive moments and make it multiply. Plus, we can even use the negative moments as positive moments to come. So if you would like to test out Opulence, the Daily Gratitude List journal. It's currently available on Amazon, and you can grab it in the description box and the pinned comment right on below. Think like a winner in the land of people who are thinking like losers. Thank you for joining the Armani Talks YouTube channel, and I will catch you on the next episode.